Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive straight into this. Because today, we're unpacking one of the most bizarre, frankly frustrating, and absolutely universal paradoxes of being human. It's this strange tendency we have to desperately want happiness, yet actively, almost systematically, choose misery. So why on earth do we self-sabotage? And, more importantly, how do we finally break free from the gravitational pull of our own negativity? So I want you to ask yourself a completely honest question right now. Have you ever found yourself just repeatedly falling into the exact same failure patterns? Like you know exactly what you should do, you know what would actually make you feel better, but somehow you just end up making the choice that leads to stress or anxiety or sadness? It's almost as if a part of you is actually comfortable there. Well, if that resonates with you, you are absolutely not alone. There's actually a very specific reason why this happens. To really get to the bottom of this, we're looking at some groundbreaking observations from a fascinating text by Ryuho Okawa. It's called The Unhappiness Syndrome. And the author points out this really profound truth. A lot of people, totally without realizing it, are actually deeply in love with their own unhappiness. Like, consciously, they'll say, I want to be happy, sure. But their subconscious mind, it's completely wired to seek out the gloom. Now, the unhappiness syndrome isn't just about feeling sad from time to time. It's a deeply ingrained subconscious pattern. The author explains that because folks secretly harbor this love for their own misfortune, it literally just takes the tiniest trigger. We're talking a misplaced comment, a minor setback, and bam, a sudden, sharp plunge straight back into their unique, comfortable failure pattern. It becomes this dark-minded, gloomy default setting. And hey, if you think this is some rare condition, brace yourself. The author suggests that a staggering 80 to 90% of people in modern society might actually suffer from this syndrome to some degree. Think about that for a second. That means if you look to your left, look to your right, odds are someone right there is dealing with this. It just brilliantly illustrates how universal and really insidious this psychological trap is. I mean, it's happening all around us, in offices, coffee shops, on your morning commute. So we're dealing with a massive disconnect here. We constantly tell ourselves, I want to be happy. We say it, we read self-help books about it, we set vision board goals for it. But when you look at the harsh reality of our subconscious actions, we choose the path that leads straight to misery. We dwell on negative thoughts, we assume the absolute worst, we nitpick and look for flaws in other people. Basically, there's just this massive gap between what we say we want and what we actively practice every single day. And the author definitely doesn't sugarcoat the danger of this mindset. Actually, he uses a pretty intense metaphor. He calls this indulgence in a gloomy, dark-minded life a form of slow suicide. Heavy, right? But it makes sense. When you continuously permit yourself to entertain thoughts that drag you down into misery, you're essentially destroying your own potential and your vitality in slow motion. It is a severe wake-up call kind of warning that we absolutely cannot afford to leave our minds on autopilot if they're wired for negativity. Okay, so the million-dollar question, how do we escape? Well, the very first mandatory step, the ultimate paradigm shift, is self-awareness. The text emphasizes that you have got to recognize your specific pattern first. You have to realize and admit that you are the one choosing the unhappiness. Because honestly, until you admit that you've been infected by this unhappiness syndrome, you can't cure it. Recognizing the trap, that is the exact key that unlocks the door to your escape. To really visualize this escape, the author uses this brilliant airplane metaphor. Imagine your life right now as an airplane. The gloomy life is heavy. The wheels are stuck to the runway, just weighed down by gravity and negativity. But our goal here isn't just to lift off an inch or two. The goal is the takeoff, leaving that ground of unhappiness entirely, ascending into the clear blue sky, and maintaining a cruising altitude of 10,000 meters. Up there, the air is clear and your mind is finally free. So, to achieve this beautiful takeoff and truly say goodbye to a gloomy life, the text provides a really actionable framework. It basically breaks down into 4 specific mindset shifts. These are 4 states of being that you absolutely must actively cultivate to get your plane off the ground and keep it flying high above all that negativity. Let's just break these down one by one. All right, the takeoff sequence begins with step 1, and this starts the absolute second you open your eyes in the morning. You must wake up feeling that life is wonderful. Now, I know exactly what you might be thinking. How many of us actually wake up like that? Most people wake up dreading the long day, hitting the snooze button 3 times, or just anticipating everything that could go wrong. But the author argues you have to actively force the realization that a new, wonderful day is beginning. You've got to consciously overwrite that morning dread with a proactive sense of wonder. Because, let's face it, if you start your day in the mud, your plane is never taking off. Okay, so once you've set that tone for the morning, we move right into the second step. And this one is all about firing up your internal engine. You must cultivate an overflowing vitality and energy. We're talking about bubbling, dynamic, physical, and mental energy. Too many of us just drag ourselves through life like depleted, sleep-deprived workers, constantly letting stress and minor troubles completely drain our batteries. But to fly at 10,000 meters, you need serious engine power. You have to figure out how to reclaim that let's go get 'em feeling, that vibrant drive to actually do things rather than just surviving them. So, now that your engine is roaring, we transition to the third step. And this is where we shift our focus outward, away from ourselves and toward the people around us. You have to see others as wonderful and genuinely rejoice in their success. This is such a profound psychological truth highlighted in the text. If you only look for flaws in other people, if you're constantly criticizing, you can never truly be happy yourself. And why is that? Because recognizing greatness in others is actually proof of your own internal happiness. When you're secure and flying high, other people's success doesn't threaten you at all. It inspires you. Which brings us to the fourth, final, and undoubtedly most profound step of this whole takeoff process. You must live for the benefit of society. The ultimate realization here is that true joy, the kind of joy that keeps you permanently cruising way above the gloom, it comes from living for something far greater than just yourself. When you finally realize that your life, your work, your very existence is contributing to making a better world, what the author actually refers to as a utopia, you unlock a level of happiness that petty, everyday grievances simply cannot touch. So let's review your daily flight checklist: waking up with joy, cultivating vitality, rejoicing in others, and living for society. And remember, this isn't just a one-and-done checklist. This is the daily maintenance required to keep your airplane at 10,000 meters. If you stop doing these things, the gravity of that unhappiness syndrome is going to pull you right back down to that dark, gloomy tarmac. You've got to be an active pilot in your own life. Which leaves us with this final thought. The unhappiness syndrome is a choice, even if it's a subconscious one. But now that you know the pattern, you hold the power to break it. So, I'm leaving you with this challenge. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, are you going to let gravity win and stay grounded in your comfortable unhappiness? Or will you grab the controls, change your mindset, and choose to take off? The sky is waiting for you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.
Have you ever stopped and thought to yourself, wait, am I secretly choosing to be unhappy? Like without even realizing it? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I mean, why on earth would anyone deliberately choose to fail or be miserable? But stick with me here. Today we're digging into the fascinating and honestly kind of hidden ways our very own minds might be setting up traps for us.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are diagnosing what's known as the Unhappiness Syndrome. We're going to explore the really surprising psychological reasons why we sometimes subconsciously choose failure over success, and even better, how we can break out of these self-sabotaging patterns to finally live the life we actually want.
So what exactly is the unhappiness syndrome? It's defined as the subconscious love of unhappiness, which leads to choices that inevitably result in personal failure. The author of our source material points out something wild. Consciously, people will say, I want to be happy, but then their actions and choices, they pull them in the exact opposite direction. It's kind of like a slow-motion, self-inflicted sabotage where, with just the slightest trigger, we fall right back into our own deeply ingrained failure patterns.
Our guide for this explainer is this really insightful book, The Unhappiness Syndrome, 28 Patterns of Unhappiness and Solutions. Get this. The author estimates that a staggering 80 to 90% of modern people suffer from some form of this syndrome. That is huge. Today, we're focusing specifically on Chapter 2, which outlines 11 very common, everyday patterns of unhappiness. We'll diagnose these psychological traps together and, more importantly, give you the direct, actionable antidotes.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll cover the unhappiness syndrome, then jump right into Trap 1, social friction, Trap 2, stalled ambition, Trap 3, toxic mindsets, and finally, wrap up with finding your joy seeds. Let's get to it. Starting off with Trap 1, social friction, navigating relationships and self-worth. If you ever find yourself struggling with how you relate to other people or feeling like you just don't quite fit in, you'll definitely want to pay close attention to this section. Our first major pattern is envy. Honestly, so many of us get trapped resenting other people's success. But the cure for this requires a profound mental shift. You have to acknowledge that the person you're envying actually represents your ideal self. They're essentially a mirror, showing you exactly what you secretly want to become. By humbly learning from their strengths, you literally turn toxic envy into incredible fuel for your own personal growth. Next up is the trap of self-display. You know, that desperate urge to show off, which usually ends up harming the people around us or just making us look insecure. Our source offers this beautiful grounding quote to fix this. It says, "Aim for quiet, steady self-expression, like a long-distance runner. It's all about endurance, not fleeting attention. Stop chasing short-term validation, right? Real self-worth and genuine impact, they're built quietly and steadily over the long haul."
Now, what if you're someone who really struggles to blend into a group, or you feel like others just don't trust you? Well, here are your rapid-fire solutions. First, you've got to discard that extreme self-consciousness. Look outward to find the good in others and actively praise them. Plus, to build deep trust, you absolutely must eliminate double dealing, what the author calls having two minds. Just ensure your words completely match your actions. Sincere, consistent actions are the ultimate cure for social friction.
Moving right along, we arrive at Trap 2, Stalled Ambition, Overcoming the Motivation Slump. This is speaking directly to anyone feeling stuck in a rut or lamenting that their big dreams are just slipping away.
So the crucial point here is how we handle a lack of motivation. A lot of people think motivation is just this magical force that falls from the sky when the time is right. Well, it isn't. To break this slump, step one is to set a small immediate goal, a tiny carrot dangling right in front of you. Step two is to achieve it and experience that vital sense of accomplishment. That little immediate win, that's exactly what generates the momentum you need to keep pushing forward. Another major ambition killer is lamenting your intelligence or constantly obsessing over poor school grades from your past. Let's be perfectly clear on this. School grades differ vastly from real-world ability. Instead of feeling trapped by your academic history, realize that you can instantly enhance your skills today by increasing your work efficiency and actively learning from wise mentors. Real-world intelligence is built dynamically. It's not just something tested on paper. And for those of you sitting on great unrealized ambitions, wondering why you haven't quote-unquote made it yet, here is a concrete timeline for you. Stop scattering your energy. You need to focus intensely on the field you are most interested in and consistently polish your talents there for at least 3 years. 3 years of dedicated, singular focus can absolutely transform a stalled ambition into a remarkable reality. Now we arrive at our final cluster, Trap 3, Toxic Mindsets, breaking free from the past and pessimism. These are the internal, often deeply painful narratives we tell ourselves that keep us anchored in the unhappiness syndrome.
One of the heaviest burdens is playing the victim because of painful past experiences. It's so easy to feel like you're always being harmed or targeted by others. But the incredibly empowering solution here is that you must actively choose to change your self-image. You have to stop viewing yourself exclusively through the lens of past trauma and consciously design a bright, constructive self-image. You are the architect of who you are right now.
For those clinging tightly to their past, you've got to stop dwelling on past setbacks. The source heavily emphasizes maintaining a sense of success, which is this deep, unshakable belief that your destiny will eventually open up. You have to live positively in the present moment. Think about it. If you are constantly looking backwards, you're inevitably going to trip over what's right in front of you. What about those of us prone to purely pessimistic thinking? Well, the author describes sensing bad premonitions as an animalistic instinct. It's a primitive survival mechanism that honestly just drags us down into modern anxiety. We have to discard that. The powerful alternative is to consciously, intentionally try to discover seeds of joy in everyday life. Happiness isn't passive. It's an active, daily treasure hunt. Finally, in our toxic mindset category, there are those burdened by lies or past flaws they desperately want to hide. Listen, rather than wasting your precious mental energy trying to cover your tracks, you must carve out a wonderful future through intellectual and substantive effort. If you build so much substance, truth, and value in your life today, your past flaws will simply fade into total irrelevance.
We've covered a ton of psychological ground today, diagnosing these traps and laying out the specific cures. And it all culminates in this final concept: finding your joy seeds. This is all about the daily, intentional actions for a happier life.
So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Instead of letting your subconscious pull you back into old failure patterns, and instead of relying on animalistic pessimism and anticipating the worst, what seed of joy are you going to choose to plant today? It could be praising a colleague, setting a tiny carrot goal, or shifting how you view someone you envy. The choice to be happy is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep planting those seeds.
Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating explainer based on Ryuho Okawa's book, The Unhappiness Syndrome. Specifically, we're going to unpack Chapter 3, which takes a deep analytical look at the psychological patterns of women and family dynamics. If you love dissecting how our internal mindsets literally shape our external reality, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Let's get started. So the text opens with this highly provocative core premise. Are you unconsciously in love with unhappiness? I know, it sounds a bit wild, right? But the author argues that a lot of people actually fall into these repeated patterns of misery without even realizing it. Why? Simply because they constantly expect others to change, rather than looking inward and reflecting on their own expectations. It's a bold claim for sure, and it really sets the stage for everything we're about to explore today. Okay, let's dive into this. We'll look at the syndrome through the lens of family life cycle, covering 1. Pragmatic marriage, 2. Spousal affection, 3. Mothers-in-law, 4. Parenting and rebellion, and finally, 5. The housewife as healer. Section 1. Pragmatic marriage, letting go of destiny. We're starting right at the beginning of the domestic life cycle. For women who might be struggling to find a marriage partner because their expectations are, well, a bit too high, the author introduces a really striking metaphor. Treat marriage hunting exactly like job hunting. The text advises letting go of past attachments and this romanticized idea of a destined red thread. Instead, you want to look for a practical alignment of mutual needs, honestly, just like an employer and an employee, to secure substantive, long-term happiness. The text actually offers some incredibly blunt advice for past romantic failures. It says, don't sit around warming a disaster egg by brooding over rejections. I mean, what a vividly brilliant phrase. Think about it. If a job interview doesn't work out, you don't just give up on having a career entirely, do you? No. You accept that the needs simply didn't align, and you move on to the next opportunity. The author urges readers to apply this exact same practical resilience to marriage. Section 2, Spousal Affection, Shifting Expectations. Moving right along the timeline to a secured marriage, the text tackles a super common post-honeymoon grievance, a husband's lack of affection. So how exactly does the unhappiness syndrome manifest here? Well, the source frames it directly, stating that simply demanding love is just a childish approach. By expecting your husband to automatically provide affection on demand, you're falling right back into that trap of expecting the external world to change instead of looking at your own actions. The proposed solution requires a total shift in perspective. Instead of passively demanding affection, the text suggests a much more active approach. Try to understand your husband's position and ask yourself how you can act as an attractive, charming partner. The core takeaway here is really all about regaining your agency. Instead of complaining about a lack of love, the text advises actively creating an environment where affection just naturally flourishes. Section 3. Mothers-in-law, a mirror of the future. Now this brings us to a notoriously exhausting domestic grievance, dealing with a mother-in-law. To reframe this whole dynamic, the author makes a really fascinating statistical assertion. They say that 70 to 80% of a husband's traits are inherited directly from his parents. So the logic naturally follows that rejecting your mother-in-law essentially means you're rejecting 70 to 80% of the very man you chose to marry. It's a pretty powerful way to completely recontextualize that relationship, don't you think? And this brilliantly illustrates 3 specific mindset shifts according to the text. First, treat her with genuine humility. Second, recognize her not as some sort of rival, but as the ultimate benefactor who actually raised the husband you love. And third, view her as a reflection of your own future self. By shifting from a place of hostility to one of empathy and respect, you essentially neutralize that domestic tension. Section 4, Parenting and Rebellion, the Trap of Forced Values. As we advance to the stage of raising children, the text addresses mothers who might be stressed out over their kids' poor academic performance or rebellious behavior. The author uses a very blunt agricultural metaphor here. If the seeds and the field are bad, the crop won't be that good. Basically meaning parents who weren't exactly top-tier students themselves probably shouldn't turn around and force unjustly high academic expectations onto their kids. It just creates an environment of hypocrisy and unfair pressure. Let's move to and see how this builds into deeper domestic issues. The book lays out a very clear chain reaction. Forced parental values make children feel unjustly pressured. Then that pressure inevitably boils over into rebellion, and in severe cases, even domestic violence. The resolution? Parents absolutely must stop trying to force the child to change. Instead, they need to correct their own behavior, respect their children as independent souls, and raise them to be self-reliant by actually leading by example. Section 5. The Housewife as Healer. Embracing the Role. Our final life cycle stage addresses a really difficult reality. What happens when a family member falls ill? According to the text, a super common symptom of the unhappiness syndrome here is feeling resentful or burdened by caregiving. The proposed solution is to reframe the housewife's identity entirely. Accept the role of family doctor and nurse. View health management and caring for the sick not as some unfair burden, but as a professional core duty of running the household. The specific advice here from the book is profound in its simplicity. It says to approach the care of the sick with love rather than resentment. By actively embracing this healer role with a real sense of purpose, the individual breaks free from the cycle of self-pity and effectively resolves the syndrome. So the crucial point is that all of these diverse domestic scenarios, from struggling to find a marriage partner, to dealing with rebellious kids, to nursing a sick relative, they're all connected by a single thread. They all trace right back to the main premise of the book, the absolute necessity of shifting your own mindset before you ever start demanding change from the world around you. This brings us to a foundational quote right from the beginning of the text. To escape from unhappiness, you must first become aware of your own patterns. The author places the ultimate responsibility for familial and personal happiness squarely on the individual's shoulders. It is only through rigorous inward reflection and a real willingness to adapt our own behavior that we can finally break the cycle. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Think about a current frustration in your own life or your own relationships. How might shifting your own expectations, rather than just waiting for the other person or the situation to magically change, completely alter your reality? It's a challenging but incredibly empowering concept to take away from this explainer. Thank you so much for diving deep with me today, and as always, keep learning. Welcome to today's explainer. We're jumping straight into something kind of mind-blowing today. We're diagnosing a fascinating and honestly deeply counterintuitive problem. Why so many highly capable working professionals completely, yet subconsciously, sabotage their own careers and finances. If you've ever felt stuck in this endless loop of bad luck at work, or you've wondered why success just always seems to stay one step out of reach, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get to the bottom of this. So, we're anchoring our whole analysis today in this really unique source material, a book called The Unhappiness Syndrome by Ryuho Okawa. Now, instead of just handing out generic career advice, it does something totally different. It frames our daily professional struggles, the stuff we normally just blame on a terrible boss or a bad economy, as actual clinical symptoms of a much deeper psychological pattern. And this concept, it completely flips the script on how we view our struggles. The unhappiness syndrome is defined here as a subconscious tendency to fall into personal failure patterns, and strangely enough, to mistakenly love unhappiness. Think about that for a second. It suggests we aren't just chronically unlucky. In a lot of cases, our own subconscious is actually leading us right off a cliff because it finds this twisted sense of comfort in familiar failure. All right, here's our diagnostic checklist for today's explainer. We're going to cover the workplace unhappiness syndrome, time management and interpersonal skills, boss relationships and emotions, hesitation and career changes, and finally, escaping debt and poverty. Starting us off with Section 1, the workplace unhappiness syndrome, recognizing your failure patterns at work. Moving right into Section 2. Time management and interpersonal skills, curing daily friction through efficiency and preparation. You know that massive trap we all kind of fall into? Putting in endless overtime and doing all that excessive after-hours socializing just to make up for poor performance at the desk? The cure here is actually to strictly compress your work time. Limit that obligatory socializing to, say, just one day a week. And then, and this is the crucial part, dedicate all that saved time to your higher goals. True efficiency isn't about grinding out longer hours, it's about carving out personal time for your own self-actualization. Okay, but what if your struggle is more interpersonal? For those who just dread negotiations and find themselves constantly losing out or lacking confidence, the source prescribes 3 very specific steps. First up, thoroughly prepare and mentally simulate your discussions well in advance. Second, don't just bulldoze in with your own agenda. Really adapt to the other person's pattern and their needs. And third, you have to actively resolve your private and family worries. Because let's face it, your private turmoil, it absolutely leaks into your public confidence. That brings us to Section 3, Relationships with Bosses and Demotions, Reframing Hierarchy and Career Setbacks. Now, I want you to really think about this paradigm shift. Do the work yourself and let the boss take the credit. It sounds crazy, right? But so many professionals literally let their own stubbornness and ego ruin their relationship with management. If you can just swallow your pride for a bit and adopt the attitude of actively making your boss successful, you paradoxically open up massive, massive doors for your own long-term promotion. But hey, what happens if the worst has already gone down? You've been demoted or you're sidelined to a window seat? The natural symptom here is to blame everyone else, spread negativity, and just spiral into despair. But the cure? You've got to step back, conduct some thorough self-reflection, and treat this unbothered time as a dormant period. Instead of fighting it, use this quiet chance to comfortably recharge your internal batteries. Intensely polish your true abilities so you are more than ready when that next opportunity inevitably pops up. Let's look at Section 4, Hesitation and Career Changes, Navigating the Anxiety of Changing Jobs. The prescription here is actually surprisingly simple, though honestly, it's pretty tough to follow in the moment. Maintain the status quo while uncertain. Look, if you're completely lost in doubt, bouncing from friends to mentors looking for someone to make the call for you, it means your mind isn't truly made up yet. So maintain your current position. Objectively assess what you're actually good at and build your internal strength until the right path becomes absolutely clear. No jumping ship out of sheer panic. Now we're going to pivot to something incredibly deep. A question that completely wrecks people well beyond the office walls. Why do some people subconsciously seek poverty and financial ruin? Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Escaping Debt and Poverty, Rewriting Your Financial Destiny. The revelation of why people stay poor is totally counterintuitive. Sure, blowing small amounts of money on gambling, like horse racing or mahjong, that's a clear factor. But it goes way deeper than that. Many people actually possess this poverty mentality that views suffering and being broke as some sort of noble, virtuous trial. Astonishingly, many subconsciously feel deeply guilty about wealth and success. They literally stay poor because making money makes them feel like bad people. Wild, right? So, treating wealth like a sin? That just leads straight to self-sabotage, wild spending, drowning in debt, or just letting a business completely ruin itself. The ultimate cure here is to completely discard your financial guilt. Affirm wealth as a positive force. Commit to a steadfast lifestyle that strictly balances your income and expenses. And listen, if you are staring down the barrel of business bankruptcy, remember that hard times are just a test of your ingenuity. Swallow your pride, aggressively cut those fixed costs, and desperately maintain that balance sheet. So we've got to wrap this up with one final provocative question for you today. Which unhappiness pattern are you subconsciously holding on to right now? Whether it's stubbornness with your boss, terrible time management, or this hidden guilt over making money, I want you to really think about it. Diagnose your own life, apply these prescriptions, and stop letting your subconscious steer you into a ditch. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep learning. You know, have you ever actually stopped to think that the very spiritual beliefs meant to bring you peace might secretly be the source of your deepest anxieties? Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your host, and today we are decoding a really fascinating concept: how we can sometimes completely unconsciously choose unhappiness through our faith. We're going to look at exactly how certain spiritual anxieties take root and, more importantly, how to systematically dismantle them using the insights from our source text today. Okay, let's dive right in. To ground us, we are looking at material that explores the psychology of chronic dissatisfaction. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 5 of Ryuho Okawa's work on the Unhappiness Syndrome. The text outlines how people often fall into these recurring patterns of failure without even realizing it. And what's really compelling is how this applies directly to religion and faith. the author argues that a lot of people approach their spirituality in a way that generates fear rather than actual liberation. So, the core problem we're tackling today is this unhappiness syndrome. It's defined as a pattern where individuals allow external supernatural fears to completely strip away their personal empowerment. Instead of faith being this amazing tool for growth, it becomes a cage of anxiety. The source material argues that true spiritual teaching should absolutely empower you, not leave you paralyzed by the unknown. To help us break free, the text targets 4 specific fears: preparing for the afterlife, navigating mixed faith marriages, rejecting negative fortune-telling, and rethinking ancestor memorials. Starting with Pillar 1, preparing for the afterlife, and moving from fear to righteous effort. The source material absolutely acknowledges that the afterlife is a reality, but it firmly advises against letting the fear of the unknown cloud your present reality. It's incredibly easy to become obsessed with what happens after we die. We've all wondered about it, right? But the author argues that this focus is entirely misplaced. Instead of agonizing over an uncontrollable future, the text shifts our focus entirely to managing our mindset and our actions right here in the present moment. So, how do you actually forge happiness after death? Well, the answer is surprisingly practical. You do it by how you live today. The text emphasizes avoiding a cloudy or negative mind. It requires continuously refining your thoughts, making what the author calls righteous efforts in this world, and importantly, correcting your mistakes through self-reflection. If you make a mistake, just acknowledge it, correct it, and keep moving forward. This continuous self-improvement is presented as the direct key to spiritual happiness, essentially putting the power right back in your hands. Moving on to Pillar 2, navigating mixed faith marriages by leading by honorable example. This section prompts a really fascinating rhetorical question. Must you share a religion to have a successful marriage? If you've ever experienced a tense Thanksgiving dinner over spiritual differences or felt family discord over beliefs, this part of the source material is going to feel incredibly relevant to you. The text draws a pretty stark contrast between 2 approaches here. The ineffective, anxiety-inducing approach is forcing your partner to convert. The author literally notes that trying to force a spouse to adopt your beliefs without their genuine understanding can actually turn a home into a hellish environment. Nobody wants that. On the flip side is the recommended empowering approach, focusing on deepening your marital bonds and living an honorable life yourself. The idea is that true faith should make you a better, more loving partner first. The source material grounds this in sheer practicality. It states that it typically takes about 2 to 3 years of consistently living an honorable, loving life to naturally change a spouse's perspective. You don't win them over with arguments or ultimatums. You win them over by demonstrating the positive, tangible effects of your faith in your daily life over a span of years. All right, Pillar 3, rejecting negative fortune-telling to forge your own destiny. The text absolutely does not pull any punches here. The majority of fortune tellers tend to be prophets of unhappiness. It's quite a statement. The author observes this ironic psychological trap where people who are already anxious about the future and seeking peace actively seek out predictions. But because human life inevitably includes illness and interpersonal trouble, fortune tellers often just highlight these negative events. This fear-based prediction traps people. They receive a negative suggestion and inadvertently start walking right toward that very failure. So how do we break out of that trap? The text offers proactive steps to override bad prophecies, and they are wonderfully empowering. First, absolutely acknowledge that destiny is not fixed. You have agency. From there, routinely correct your own mistakes, live with a mind of love for others, and actively look for the good in people. By adopting this constructive mindset, the source material argues you take absolute control of your life's trajectory, rendering any negative fortune-telling completely powerless over you. At our final pillar, rethinking ancestor memorials, viewing prosperity as the truest tribute. Take a look at this bold, straightforward rule from the text. Do not blame ancestors for your misfortune. The author forcefully challenges the myth that unseen ancestors are just actively trying to harm their living descendants because they haven't been adequately memorialized. In fact, the source points out that blaming an ancestor from 4 or more generations ago for your modern-day problems is a common, entirely misguided spiritual trap. It's actually often used as a manipulative tactic by certain religious businesses to sell memorial services. The author reasons pretty logically here. What great-grandparent, sitting comfortably in the afterlife, would actually want to curse their own descendants with a flat tire, a bad back, or financial ruin? The true nature of an ancestor is to wish for the absolute prosperity of their lineage. So, what is the right way to honor them? The truest form of memorial requires no fear-based rituals whatsoever. Step 1, correct your own mind and daily actions. Step 2, build a harmonious and loving family. And Step 3, demonstrate a prosperous, bright life. The text states that when ancestors see their descendants living vibrantly and correctly, it brings them peace and even helps elevate them in the spiritual realm. Your prosperity is the ultimate tribute. Let's synthesize all of this into our final takeaway: empowering your spiritual destiny. The overarching narrative becomes crystal clear. On one side is the unhappiness syndrome, a life ruled by anxiety over the afterlife, strange relationships over dogma, fear of fortune tellers, and supernatural blame. But on the other side is the liberated reality the text advocates, the empowerment pattern. It's entirely about taking ownership of your life through self-reflection, love, and righteous earthly action. It shifts the center of spiritual gravity right back into your own heart and your daily choices. Which brings us to our final question for you to ponder today. Are you unconsciously letting fear dictate your faith? And how will you take control of your spiritual mindset starting right now? Remember, true spiritual understanding shouldn't be a source of anxiety. It should be a framework that empowers you to build a brighter, more constructive life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I look forward to exploring more fascinating concepts with you next time.